Notre Dame cracked the top 5 in the latest CFP rankings, but plenty of Irish fans are upset because they're still ranked behind a Penn State team who barely survived Minnesota last week. But today, I'll explain why I think that's a good thing for the Irish as they get ready to play arch rival USC with their season on the line. This is Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up? Welcome into Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. My name is Tyler Wojciak, and I'm the host. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports, and it's great to have you here on Wednesday, November 27th. And thanks for starting your Thanksgiving Eve right here by making this your first listen of the day. Please consider taking a quick second to hit that subscribe button on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you might be tuning in today. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Absolutely loaded show on tap today. I'm going to go through my full preview of Notre Dame's matchup against arch rival USC with everything you need to know, scouting reports in all three phases, keys to the game, plus my predictions at the end. But we begin with the latest CFP rankings that came out late on Tuesday night, and the Irish have officially cracked the top 5 with just 2 more rankings to go after this one. There's going to be another rankings after this weekend, the last weekend of the regular season, and then one more after the conference championship games. And those rankings are going to determine the playoff, who gets in, and where they're seated. So, in the latest iteration of the rankings, here's how the top 12 looks. At 1, Oregon, 2, Ohio State, 3, Texas, 4, Penn State, 5, Notre Dame, 6, Miami, 7, Georgia, 8, Tennessee, 9, SMU, 10, Indiana, 11, Boise State, 12, Clemson, and Alabama is 13th. They just miss it along with Clemson. So right now, Notre Dame is in the top 5, and they certainly have a case to be ahead of Penn State and take that 4 spot, especially considering Notre Dame just smacked around an Army team who was ranked 19th in the last CFP rankings. They're not ranked anymore, probably because Notre Dame beat them in such dominant fashion, but a lot of fans are upset that Notre Dame is not ahead of Penn State. And that is really important because right now in this current projection, Penn State would have the 6th seed. They'd face 11 Indiana at home. And if they were to win that game, then they would take on the ACC champion, who we presume will be Miami. Meanwhile, Notre Dame would host a game in the 7-10 matchup against SMU. And then the winner of that game would take on the SEC champ, who right now Texas is the highest ranked in that group. So the path is a lot harder as the 7th seed compared to the 6th seed. But I actually think it's a good thing that Notre Dame is 1 spot behind Penn State as we sit here today. Let me explain. The Irish certainly have a case to be ranked ahead of Penn State right now. They are playing much better football than the Nittany Lions as of late. That's not even debatable. Penn State did not look very good in that game against Minnesota. They barely won that game. Now, it was on the road. They did get the win, but they did not look very good in that matchup. Both teams have 1 win over a team who's currently ranked. Notre Dame beat Texas A&M, who's currently 20th in the CFP rankings. Penn State beat number 23, Illinois. Penn State certainly has a better loss compared to Notre Dame. They lost at home against Ohio State by a touchdown compared to Notre Dame, who lost to a terrible MAC school, Northern Illinois, at home. But should we mention that Penn State was also in a dogfight earlier in the year against the MAC team. However, they ultimately beat Bowling Green 34-27, while Notre Dame ultimately took the L. So obviously Notre Dame should be penalized for that loss, and they have been really all season long. Right now, Penn State and Notre Dame have 1 common opponent, Purdue. Notre Dame beat the Boilermakers 66-7. Penn State beat Purdue a couple weeks ago, 49-10. So even though Notre Dame won by a more significant margin, it's not that extreme. Penn State still blew out the Boilermakers as well. But after this week, they will have another common opponent, USC on the road. Penn State had to rally from a 14-point deficit to beat USC in overtime on October 12th. Notre Dame is going to have their shot against USC this Saturday, and that is why I think this current ranking is a good thing for Notre Dame. Neither team is going to play in a conference championship game, so Saturday is the last chance for both teams to impress the committee. Penn State plays a 4-7 Maryland team who is 1-7 in the Big Ten. Maryland's only win was over USC, by the way. But Notre Dame can make a statement to the committee and everyone else in college football if they do what Penn State couldn't do, and that is blow out USC in the Coliseum. The Irish cannot afford to be complacent at this point in time. They have to make the most out of their last opportunity. A win gets him in the playoff, no doubt about that, but I believe a blowout win over USC could be enough to jump Penn State in next week's polls, regardless of how the Nittany Lions fare against Maryland. And if Notre Dame were fourth this week, they might get a little complacent. Now, that's not an option. Either way, they have to win to control their own destiny. And it looks like Marcus Freeman is already using every ounce of motivation that he can possibly find in order to get this team ready to play against USC. Bo Collins mentioned to the media that Notre Dame has been playing that 2022 game against USC, that loss in the Coliseum around the Goog all week long, is a reminder to the guys who are on this year's team who played in that game that they cannot take USC for granted, and that was not a fun feeling losing to your arch rival in the last game of the regular season. Now, he has even more motivation to get this team ready to come out, ready to go from the opening snap and take the will of their opponent, because a win is great. A blowout win is even better because there's a big difference between the 6th and the 7th seed, and I honestly think that if Notre Dame goes out there and they smack USC around and they get another dominant win to close out the year, that could be enough to jump Penn State in the rankings. It might not be. It might not be. We don't know with this committee. You never really know with them, but I think my own hunch is that it will be enough to jump them. Then Notre Dame would be ranked 4th, and then depending on how the conference championships play out, they are more likely to get the 6th seed in the college football playoff, and that would be massive for Notre Dame, not only for their chances to win the first-round game, but potentially a second-round game as well. Because if you get that 6th seed, you're probably playing in the ACC champ in the next round as opposed to the SEC champ, who's going to be the 2 seed. Theoretically, Notre Dame should be able to take care of business there, regardless, 6 or 7, at least in the first round. But that second-round matchup is certainly key. And I have been seeing some people say that Notre Dame could still get in the playoff at this point with a loss this weekend. Look, they might be right. I don't even want to entertain that right now, because if Texas A&M loses to Texas this weekend, which they certainly could, then A&M is going to drop out of the top 25, and Notre Dame would have 2 losses and 0 ranked wins. We can forget arguing whether or not they should be. In my opinion, they wouldn't even deserve to be in the college football playoff if that were to happen, if they were to lose to USC and then Texas A&M loses to Texas. So I don't even want to get into that. I just want to keep the focus on what Notre Dame has at stake this weekend, and it means everything. Their season is on the line. They have to win this game, and a blowout win would go even further in the eyes of the committee, and I think that the fact that Notre Dame is ranked behind Penn State right now is going to give them a little bit more motivation to go out there and dominate their opponent. But speaking of that game against USC, here is everything you need to know about the matchup. Kickoff, 3:30 p.m. Eastern time inside the Los Angeles Coliseum. It's going to be 12:30 p.m. local. As someone who's out here in LA and I'm going to that game, I did not love that news. I thought a 4:30 kick or even a 4 p.m. kick, prime time in the Eastern time zone slot would have been great. But CBS is going to be broadcasting this one. They get to pick. They get the 3:30 time slot. So you're going to have Brad Nessler, Gary Danielson on the call. The weather should be great in this one. High of 76, no wind, but there might be some cloud cover. It has been pretty cloudy in LA as of late. I think it might be a little cloudy on Saturday, but still great football weather. Notre Dame leads the all-time series 49, 37, and 5. In the past few years, Notre Dame has kind of dominated USC. They certainly dominated USC last year in a 48-20 win, and the Irish have won 5 out of the last 6 matchups, but they are 2-3 in their last 5 games in the LA Coliseum. This is the 3rd time that Notre Dame has come out to LA with a highly important postseason berth on the line. 2012, it was a berth in the national championship. Notre Dame was able to win that one. 2018, berth in the college football playoff. They barely got by a bad USC team in that game, and now 2024, pretty similar circumstances. Lincoln Riley is the head coach of USC. He's 80-23 all-time as head coach, but a lot of those wins came at Oklahoma. He is 25-13 at USC. This is his 3rd season, and he is just 14-10 in the last 2 seasons. They are 6-5 this year, and they actually started off with a big win against LSU, and they followed it up with a blowout over Utah State, and there was some momentum there with the Trojans. You're thinking, wait a second, are they going to be a surprise team in the Big Ten this year? Then they proceeded to lose 4 out of their next 5, and they have led in the fourth quarter of every single game they have played this season, but they just have not been able to finish, and they made a change at quarterback following the loss at Washington. Miller Moss was benched for Jaden Maiava from UNLV, and he is 2-0 since becoming the starter. So the spread for this one, Notre Dame is favored by 7.5 right now, according to our friends at FanDuel, and the over-under is 51.5. Both of these teams have been pretty good against the spread this season. Notre Dame is one of the best in the country. They are 8-2-1 against the spread this year, but USC is 7-4. The Irish are 4-0 against the spread on the road. USC is 5-0 against the spread at home, so something's got to give in this one. The public loves Notre Dame here, which makes me a little concerned. Typically, I like to fade the public, but hey, maybe it's for a good reason because, like I said, Notre Dame has been great against the spread this year. So that's what you need to know. That's what's at stake in this one. Now it's time to get to the scouting reports. And coming up, I'm going to explain why the coaching matchup between Al Golden and Lincoln Riley is certainly the one that stands out. But I believe Mike Denbrock's offense going up against D'Anton Lynn's defense will be the difference in this game. That's next on Locked On Irish. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. All right, so I'm going to admit, we have kind of been in a slump lately, but we're going to take the Lions minus 10.5 against the Bears. First NFL game on Thanksgiving. Let's start out there with the winner. The Lions are the hottest team in football. The Bears are the opposite, and I think the Lions are going to cover this one, even though it's a lot of points. And for more, just visit FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, let's dive into the scouting report. The first matchup I want to look at is Notre Dame's offense going up against USC's much improved defense. So Mike Denbrock is the offensive coordinator for Notre Dame. D'Anton Lynn is the new defensive coordinator for USC. I guess he's not that new anymore because it's late November, but I believe this is the matchup that's going to determine this game. D'Anton Lynn was a very hot commodity in the last coaching cycle because he completely transformed UCLA's defense in his first year on the job. The Bruins went from 87th in scoring defense in 2022 to 11th in 2023. A massive turnaround. Very impressive job by D'Anton Lynn. He also has a bunch of NFL experience as well. And then Lincoln Riley poached him to come over to USC, their crosstown rival, and he has done a really good job of improving this defense in his first year on the job. Last year, USC's defense was horrific. They were the year before as well. Both years, they were coached by Alex Grinch until Lincoln Riley let Grinch go in the middle of last season. USC finished 121st out of 134 teams in scoring defense last season. They were allowing 34.4 points per game. This year, though, they are currently 32nd in the country with a 13-point improvement. They're allowing just 21.2 points per game this season as opposed to 34.4 last season. Meanwhile, Mike Denbrock has had to revamp Notre Dame's offense with a new quarterback from the transfer portal, and so far, he's done a really good job. They certainly started out slow. He called that in the preseason. He told pretty much everyone who would listen, hey, the offense you see in week 1 is going to look a lot different than the offense you see in week 13, and now that we're coming into week 13, that has become very clear. What Notre Dame's offense looked like against Army is really nothing compared to what it looked like in that season opener against Texas A&M and even week 2 against Northern Illinois. It's a big reason why they lost that game. But now Notre Dame's offense is 6th in the country in scoring offense, and they are 11th in yards per play, and they have been humming lately. They had a great performance against Army. They put up a lot of points against Virginia and Florida State, and even though they had some empty possessions, the fact that they were still very explosive in those games, really since the bye week, you've seen a big improvement from this Notre Dame offense, and now you have a much improved Notre Dame offense going against a much improved USC defense. And I know that Army was better on paper. They were one of the top in the country in scoring defense and yards per play and all that stuff, but That was against one of the weakest schedules in the entire country, and I think this is the best defense Notre Dame has faced in a long time because they just have a different caliber of athletes compared to Army and some of the other ACC teams that Notre Dame has beaten up on this year. USC is good at getting teams off the field. They're 18th in the country in third down defense. They're 43rd in rush yards per game allowed, but they're also allowing 4.3 yards per carry, which is actually pretty mediocre. They're also middle of the pack against the pass. They're 65th in pass efficiency defense, and they've cleaned up the missed tackles to a pretty large extent. Last year, they missed a tackle once every 6.8 plays. Now it's up to 8.6, so they still miss some tackles, but that is certainly better than what they were last year. That was a major, major problem for pretty much all Alex Grinch defenses. So they have certainly made improvements, but they also have a bunch of athletes out there on the field. Number 4, Easton Macarenas Arnold is everywhere on the field. He leads the team with 87 tackles. He also had 106 tackles last season. He also leads the team in sacks with 3. Plus, he has 2 picks. He does have a lot of missed tackles, though, 13 on the season. Part of that is because he's always around the ball, but still something to keep in mind when you watch this USC defense. I really like number 13, Mason Cobb. He's a good player. Second on the team in tackles with 68. Also good in coverage. He has 3 pass breakups, 2 interceptions, including a 55-yard pick 6, which, again, is impressive for a linebacker. But honestly, I think their best defensive player is number 2, Jalen Smith. He's a very good cornerback. Teams are completing just 56% of passes thrown his way. He has not given up a touchdown all year long. He also has 2 interceptions and a 56.4 QBR when targeted. He's also pretty stout against the run for a corner. 17 stops according to Pro Football Focus. So this is going to be a tough matchup for Notre Dame's wide receivers. But even though I have a bunch of respect for this defense, Notre Dame should still be able to win this matchup and put up points, which leads me to my keys for the Notre Dame offense. They got to start out fast. They have to. USC is 6-5, so I don't know how motivated this team is going to be in the last game of the season. It is a rivalry game. This is a good opportunity for them to end their season on a high note. But then again, with so many guys probably going to hit the transfer portal, like maybe they already have one foot out the door. If Notre Dame starts out fast, they put up a couple quick touchdowns, USC is way more likely to fold than if you start slow, let them hang around. That'll give this defense and really the entire team more confidence. Another way to drain that confidence is my second key, be physical. Notre Dame can do this by running the football. They just ran for 275 yards against Army, who is good at stopping the run, 234 against Virginia, and they are 11th in the country in rush yards per game. It's not going to be easy, though. USC only allowed 118 rushing yards against Penn State, and Penn State is 2 of the best running backs in the country, Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton. But they also gave up 290 rushing yards to Michigan, and the Wolverines weren't even trying to pass the ball in that game. They completed 7 passes for barely over 30 yards. So Michigan just out-physicaled them on the line of scrimmage, and that is how they were able to win that game. And if Notre Dame gets on the board early and they out-physical USC, I believe the Trojans will fold, and the Irish will be able to run away with this game in the second half. But as for the USC offense versus the Notre Dame defense, this is another really exciting matchup because you've got Lincoln Riley, one of the best offensive minds of this generation, going up against Al Golden, who I believe is the best defensive coordinator in the entire country. This is not a vintage Lincoln Riley offense, though, but I have enough respect for Riley as a play caller and as an offensive mind to think he's probably going to have some tricks up his sleeve for this one, especially when you consider how Al Golden just embarrassed him and Caleb Williams last year. This year, USC is 56th in scoring offense, 34th in yards per play, 84th in rush yards per game, but they're still going to rack up yards through the air. They are 13th in pass yards per game. The fact that they are 84th in rush yards per game really stands out to me because I believe the best Lincoln Riley offenses are the ones that are able to run the ball effectively. That kind of seems like a contradiction because Lincoln Riley likes to run the air raid, but he does prioritize running the football. Look at the best offenses he had at Oklahoma. And even the year that Caleb Williams won the Heisman, they're able to run the ball really well when Travis Dye, the Oregon transfer, was healthy, and Austin Jones was also really good. He killed Notre Dame in 2022. That helped set up the pass and just put even more stress on the defense. This year, USC has a really talented running back at number 4, Woody Marks. He has 1,100 rush yards for 5.7 yards per carry and 9 touchdowns this year. Had a huge game in their win against Nebraska, 146 yards on 19 carries, but UCLA was able to keep him in check last week, though. He only had 76 yards on 18 carries. And as I mentioned earlier, following the loss to Washington, USC made a quarterback change. They benched Miller Moss for Jaden Mayava. Moss had some great moments this year. He looked really good in that game against LSU, and you're thinking, wow, Lincoln Riley has another one. but he also had 9 interceptions, and they were costly interceptions at that. So USC opted to bench him for the future option here. Jaden and Mayava won both of his starts. He looked good against Nebraska. 71% completion percentage, 259 yards, 3 touchdowns and a pick. He also had 20 rushing yards and a touchdown on the ground as well. He's a little bit more mobile than Miller Moss, but then he regressed a little bit against UCLA. Only 54% completion percentage, 224 yards, 1 touchdown, 0 interceptions. It's USC, so you know that they're going to have some talented guys to throw to on the outside. Number 6, Mekhi Lemon is their leading receiver, but they have a bunch of different guys that can hurt you. Zachariah Branch is electric. Notre Dame fans know all about him. Even though he has not taken off quite like some people expected, he's still always a weapon when he has the ball. Jacoby Lane is a good receiver. He has 6 touchdowns on the year, but keep an eye out for Deuce Robinson. He was one of the top 2 tight ends, I believe, when he was coming out of high school, but he kind of plays like a wide receiver role for USC. He's 6'6", 220 pounds. He kind of looks like Aaron Judge, and he is a baseball player as well. This guy has 5 touchdowns on 20 catches this year. He's kind of a matchup nightmare for defenses. So even though this offense has not been able to put it all together, they certainly have got some weapons, and I'm so excited to see that battle between Lincoln Riley and Al Golden. So my keys for the Notre Dame defense: get pressure on Mayava. This is critical. Notre Dame was in the backfield all night last year against Caleb Williams. 6 sacks, 11 TFLs in that one, which also led to 5 turnovers. Mayava is a true sophomore, and he's only started in 2 games this season, so Al Golden is going to do everything he possibly can to confuse this guy, scheme up pressures that he doesn't see coming, and mistakes are going to compound in a game like this. So if they're able to get to him early, I think he'll start to press, and that will lead to more mistakes. And you compare that to how Caleb Williams played in 2022 when Notre Dame just could not get him down in the backfield. That is really what set up a huge game for him. He made the Notre Dame defense look silly in that one, and that's really the only time that a quarterback really got the better of an Al Golden defense. Now, granted, Notre Dame was down a couple of corners. Tariq Bracy and Cam Hart were out in that game, but they just couldn't get Caleb Williams down in the backfield, so they got to get pressure on Mayava and get him down. My second key for the Notre Dame defense: contain Woody Marks. I already talked about him a lot, and we know that Al Golden likes to run a bend but don't break defense against teams who are going to try and push the ball downfield. That being said, Woody Marks is too good. Just let him go out there and get hot. They have to keep him in check, or else USC is going to be able to control the ball and keep it away from Notre Dame's offense. He's also good enough to break open a big run for a touchdown, so even if you're trying to prevent explosive plays in the passing game, they could burn you in the running game as well. And I understand you want to prevent explosives, but you just cannot afford to let Woody Marks start to run all over you. And Notre Dame is one of the best defenses in the country. There's no doubt about it. But they're going to be tested in this game in a way that we have not really seen since the Louisville game. The Louisville offense was able to stress this Notre Dame defense quite a bit in that one. This is going to be an awesome matchup to watch, but I have faith that Al Golden is going to have his guys ready to go, and I just don't think that a quarterback in his second year, especially one like Jaden Mayava, who just hasn't really played that much ball this year, is going to be able to get into a rhythm throughout the game and get the better of this defense. Coming up, Notre Dame was able to seal the win against USC last season with a big play on special teams. Could we see that again on Saturday? That, plus my predictions, is next on Locked On Irish. So I'll admit it, in the past, I like to make fun of Lincoln Riley for not hiring a special teams coordinator, not caring enough about the third phase of the game, and that would often burn him. We saw it last year when Jadarian Price broke off a kickoff return for a touchdown that basically put the game away for the Irish, and that sealed the win. And I thought maybe Lincoln Riley should care a little bit more about special teams. Well, now he does. He actually hired a special teams coordinator. Ryan Daugherty is his name, and I believe that special teams is going to have a big impact on this game. I'm not exactly sure where it's going to come from because there's so many different options here, but I think that just a little sneak peek to my predictions, we are going to see a big special teams play in this game. So USC's kicker is a transfer from Georgia Southern. He was actually better last season for Georgia Southern than he has been at USC. He's 14 of 20 on field goal attempts this year, which is 70%. He's missed a couple chip shots inside 30 yards, and he's also 4 of 8 from 40 plus. He has a long of 54 though, so he does have some range, but he's just been pretty inconsistent this year. They do have an elite punter though, which is kind of surprising. Normally, you wouldn't think that Lincoln Riley would have an elite punter. Well, he does. This guy's probably the best in the country right now. He was just named a finalist for the Ray Guy Award. He's averaging 48.8 yards per punt, has a long of 62 yards, and is downed 22 punts. 22! inside the 20. So he has been great at flipping the field, and I think that's a big reason why USC's defense has been able to have success is because they have won the field position battle more often than not. My question is Notre Dame going to be as aggressive trying to block one of his punts? This is a good punter. It's going to be hard to rattle him. And if they do continue to be aggressive, is USC finally going to be the team to try and run a fake against this highly aggressive unit? We are going to have to see. I'm surprised no one has tried to run a fake against Notre Dame yet. Maybe it's because Notre Dame kind of has a feel for it and they are really aggressive when they feel like they have the advantage. But I do think that USC's punter is going to have an impact on this game. But maybe Lincoln Riley reverts back to the 2022 strategy when he just let Caleb Williams punt, because that was at a time when Brian Mason and his unit was basically averaging one huge punt block a game. So USC was like, we're not going to let you do that. They never ran out in a traditional punt formation. They would move the ball enough where it felt like maybe they would go for it, and then Caleb Williams would just punt the ball. And it was that kind of day where even when Caleb Williams punted the ball, it was a good play. So credit to Lincoln Riley. He eliminated that phase of the game that year. We'll see if he's able to do the same this year. As for the return game, Zachariah Branch, he's the punt returner. Notre Dame fans know just how electric he is back there. He had a huge punt return last year that set up a critical touchdown for USC, made it feel like a game, but then Price just immediately followed that up with a kickoff return for a touchdown. But Branch is just so scary when he has the ball in his hands, although he only has a long of 20 this year as a punt returner. But still, I just get the feeling that he could break out at any time. Mekhi Lemon and Zachariah Branch have split kickoff return duties this year, and Lemon has been good too. He has a long of 80 yards. He did not score on that play. Branch has returned 5 as well. He has yet to bring one back to the house this year. But again, anytime Branch has the ball in special teams, I'm going to be holding my breath. So when you look at it in totality, you think about what USC brings to the table with their punter, some inconsistencies in the kicking game, but some dynamic returners. And then you look at Notre Dame, who's been able to block punts or at least disrupt the punter. And then you have a kicker or a kicking situation, which has been terrible. They missed their last 4 field goal attempts. Special teams is going to make an impact in this game. So that leads me to my predictions. You're going to see a lot of people picking USC in this one, and I honestly get it. All right, it's at home. They've been in a lot of close games this year. Historically, Notre Dame has lost a lot of games inside the Coliseum as a top 10 team. 2006, 2002, 98, 96. The list goes on and on. But they also won the last 2 times they entered the Coliseum as a top 10 team, in 2012 and 2018. As I mentioned in the Everything You Need to Know segment, it's a pretty similar circumstance. Those are really good Notre Dame teams going up against bad USC teams. Both of those games were battles. This current USC team has not been blown out once all season, and Notre Dame is favored by 7.5. That's a lot of points when you consider how USC has lost games this year. It seems like it always goes down to the wire. And in this series, Notre Dame has not blown out USC on the road since 2000. And even in that game, they only won by 17. Plus, it's college football. We have seen these kinds of trap games a lot this season. Texas A&M, last week, they lost to a bad Auburn team on the road. Ole Miss lost to a Florida team that's like middle of the pack, although Florida has been playing a lot better as of late. Miami lost on the road to Georgia Tech. There are examples of playoff caliber teams losing to inferior opponents on the road late in the season, and a lot of people are wondering, could Notre Dame be next? They could be, but I don't see it happening. In part because of that loss to Northern Illinois at the beginning of the season. I'm of the belief that that game taught this team a very valuable lesson. It's still very embarrassing. It's still a black eye in the program, and they are going to hear about it unless they make a run in this year's college football playoff. But now this team knows that they cannot afford to take a single opponent for granted, especially a team like USC on the road. They know what's at stake. They also know that USC brings one hell of a challenge. I believe that Marcus Freeman is going to get this team ready to go. They're going to come out ready to play. And even though I expect USC to contend, ultimately, I like the Irish to win and to cover. I'm going to take Notre Dame to win 35-17. I believe USC is going to be able to score a couple touchdowns. They're going to be able to move the ball a little bit more effectively than most teams have against this defense. But the Irish are going to lean on Jeremiah Love, their star, who's playing as well as anyone in the country right now. I think Riley Leonard is going to have a big game. And I think Mitchell Evans is going to have a breakout game this one. That might be a surprise to some people. He's had a really quiet season so far, but he's back. He's healthy. He looked really good a couple weeks ago, and even though he had a quiet game against Army, USC showed a vulnerability against Penn State. Tyler Warren did everything he wanted against this USC defense. Now, Tyler Warren is likely going to win the Mackey Award, so he's one of the best tight ends in the country, if not the best tight end, and he's certainly a different player than Mitchell Evans. Notre Dame isn't going to be using him in the Wildcat like Penn State does, but I think this is going to be a huge game for Mitchell Evans because they're probably going to try to go away from Jalen Smith, the USC cornerback, who I think is exceptional, and that is going to be a matchup that Notre Dame is going to be able to exploit. Again, it's not going to be easy, but ultimately I believe the Irish are going to be ready for the fight, and they're going to book their trip to the playoff and one more game at home in Notre Dame Stadium with a big win in Los Angeles. That's going to do it for me today. I will have an episode out for you tomorrow on Thanksgiving in case you need a 30-minute distraction from your family at some point over the course of these next 2 days. Great friend of the program, Tim Murray of VSiN, will be joining me to talk more about this matchup with USC. We're going to break down some potential playoff scenarios, and we're going to revisit some of our over-unders from the preseason. That will be the last episode of the week, though, so enjoy the Thanksgiving holiday. And during the season of giving, I would greatly appreciate it if you took a second to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast. Also, if you enjoyed the show today, please give this video a like if you're watching along on YouTube, or rate the show 5 stars and leave a review on your preferred podcast platform. And I'm going to see you on Thanksgiving.